The arena orbited a dying red star, its silhouette scorched into the void like a halo made from the sins of too many species. 50,000 seats. 50,000 creatures pulsing, rumbling, shrieking, breathing through gills, pores, or throats, waited in rabid anticipation. They weren't here for justice. They were here for the sound of bones breaking. The banners above the stands flapped with artificial gravity gusts. Each bore the sigil of a different species, spirals, mandibles, what looked like a flayed foot. But one stood alone, near the bottom edge, poorly stitched with fraying thread, Earth's emblem. Unofficial. Hung upside down. This was the championship of blood and spite, hosted once per cycle in the Varnak's crucible. A supposedly neutral combat ground where warlords, generals, and mildly aggravated private citizens could settle disputes. By combat. To the death. Preferably spectacular. The crowd surged to its feet as the arena shifted. Plates of stone twisted like puzzle pieces, revealing the blood-hardened floor beneath. The announcer, a floating sack of mucus named Thalgleam, drifted center stage, its voice echoing across languages. Lords, spores, genders undisclosed. Tonight we offer you the final reckoning. The crowd roared. Several feathers exhaled celebratory vapor, briefly igniting a nearby cluster of drosslings, who howled with joy as they caught fire. On the left platform, raised on a throne of shattered armor, sat General Korvax, the pulverizer, 12 feet tall, covered in ceremonial scars, each one representing a planet conquered or a treaty broken. He rolled his neck, vertebrae cracking like tectonic plates shifting. In one hand, he held a hammer forged from the bones of a Theli war beast. In the other, a small golden charm, a human child's shoe. The crowd adored him. He had slaughtered 7 human children during a border conflict exercise, and the footage, edited for entertainment, had gone viral across half the galaxy. The screams had been dubbed over with laughter tracks. Merchandising deals followed. He was undefeated. Across the pit, the challenger's platform rose slowly. There was no fanfare, no glowing sigils, no sponsors, just one figure, small by comparison. A woman in worn cargo pants, a plain jacket, and dust-covered boots. She carried nothing but a small data slate and a canvas pack. Designation, Combatant 347. I. Ellie Harker species, human role, parent, announced Thalgleam, with the same tone one might reserve for mold. The crowd murmured. Some booed. Others laughed. A gelatinous blob tossed a glob of something pink in her direction. She didn't flinch. Korvax rose, all 12 feet of him flexing underplated muscle and ceremonial armor. They send a mother to face me, he sneered, voice like gravel and oil. What does she plan to do? Soothe me with bedtime stories. Ellie stepped forward, calm, controlled, her expression unreadable. No, she said. I came to bury you. The words didn't echo. They sank. A few members of the audience went silent, not from fear, but from curiosity. Humans weren't supposed to sound like that. They were meant to charm, beg, apologize. Thalgleam flailed its mucus appendages. Let the ritual marking commence. Korvax raised his hammer and struck the floor. A fissure burst outward in a perfect, circular pattern. For the glory of the Mantar Dominion. Ellie pulled a pin from her hair. Cut her palm. Let the blood fall on the stone beneath her. For my children. The arena trembled. Inside the viewing booth, a group of Zarthaki diplomats exchanged uneasy glances, their ink sacs twitching. She invoked blood memory protocol. One whispered. That's impossible, said another. She's not licensed. She is now, a third replied, sliding a new document across the table. The ink shimmered. Writ of retribution, authorized. On the sidelines, fleather spectators hissed in religious alarm. Blood memory in public? Unclean. Ellie stood in the center now. The canvas pack lay at her feet. She opened it with slow precision. Inside, 7 folded pieces of paper. Crayon drawings. Names. Ages. She didn't show them to anyone. She just laid them on the ground, one by one, like altar stones. Korvax snorted. What is this? Sentiment? A weakling's weapon. Ellie looked up. A reminder. He stepped forward, thudding across the arena. Do you think this is noble? You'll die for theatrics. No. But you will. The murmurs grew louder now. Cameras orbited her slowly. Galactic viewers tuned in. A young Varnaxian child, watching from a fungal commune on the outer rim, turned to their caretaker and asked, "Why isn't she afraid?" Because Ellie Harker was not afraid. She had moved past it, past fear, past grief, past rage. What remained was something quieter, sharper. A mother who had outlived her children. A soldier of a different war. And the galaxy was about to learn what that war had made her. Thalgleam's voice crackled. Prepare for combat. Mark the stone. Initiate countdown. A digital glyph pulsed above the arena. 10. 9. Korvax twirled his hammer, cracking the ground with each spin. Do you know what their last words were, human? Ellie didn't blink. Do you? The glyph ticked. 3. 2. 1. The world dropped. Gravity spiked. Wind howled from all sides. The Crucible's arena fragmented into moving plates, each designed to disorient, separate, and confuse. Weapons rained from above, chosen at random. Blades, whips, sonic spears. Ellie ignored them all. Korvax lunged. 12 feet of rage. His hammer screamed through the air, fast as a starship. He swung low, aiming to separate her legs from her torso. She ducked, one knee grazing the stone. The wind howled. The audience roared. Ellie turned and ran, not in fear, but calculation. She didn't need to win in the first strike. She just needed him to believe he already had. He chased, bellowing, laughing. Run, human. Run. I'll decorate my mantle with your skull. Ellie pivoted mid-stride, reached into her pocket, and flung something. A marble. It bounced once, twice, then detonated. Korvax screamed as his left eye burst into blue flame. He stumbled. Not fatal, but enough. Enough for her to mark the floor. The old blood mixed with his now. A binding. She whispered to herself. They always forget the rules they write. He charged again, one eye blind, fury rising. She sidestepped. Let him pass. Carved a single line with her heel behind him. Why do you run? He shouted. To make you tired, she replied. Around them, the arena shifted again. Spires rose. Saws spun. But Ellie never stopped watching him. Every muscle twitch. Every overreach. She wasn't trying to win the crowd. She was trying to remember how he moved. The same way her son had danced. The same pattern her daughter had drawn in the air with her fingers when she was nervous. Circular. Predictable. Repeating. Now she waited. He charged one final time. Hammer raised. And Ellie stepped forward. Right into the path of death. The audience gasped. Even Thalgleam hesitated. Then, just as the hammer fell, she dropped to her knees, used her own blood to slide under his legs, twisted mid-spin, and drove her heel into the exact nerve cluster she'd memorized during the investigation trials the galaxy had chosen to forget. He froze. Every limb locked. She stood behind him now, and whispered just loud enough. They didn't scream. They sang. Then she pressed a second marble against the base of his spine. No explosion, just silence, and the sound of a giant falling. Ellie Harker stood still. The crowd didn't erupt. Not yet. It was too stunned, too shaken. Only one sound broke through first. The quiet, mechanical ding of the writ of retribution being automatically stamped. Executed. Then, at last, the crowd howled. But Ellie was already walking off the field. Not victorious. Just finished. And, in her wake, for the first time in galactic history, no one laughed at the human. They watched. And waited. Because something had changed. The form asked for species, gender, age, intention. Ellie Harker wrote human, left the second blank, noted 37, and under intention scrawled, execution of writ 497, The pen sputtered once, as if objecting to her handwriting. The Zarthaki clerk behind the counter, skin rippling with bureaucratic irritation, glared at her with 7 eyes and said, "You missed a box." "I didn't," she replied, placing the form down with quiet finality. "That one doesn't apply." It always applies, the clerk muttered, tail coiling like a question mark. Even for, he checked her form again. Freelance vengeance claims. Ellie didn't argue. She had long since stopped offering explanations to creatures who couldn't understand what had been taken from her. Her fingers bore the subtle calluses of old labor, fieldwork, kitchen knives, children's cradles. None of it screamed killer. But she didn't have to scream anymore. The clerk scanned her blood print into the registry. Somewhere, across a bureaucratic data grid the size of a gas giant, a red flag blinked awake. Active human combatant registered. Claim initiated. By then, Ellie was already walking down the long, sterile corridor toward the Crucible's prep quarters, her boots echoing in the stillness. The memory came uninvited. 7 pairs of shoes at the door. One mother's silence on the landing. Her daughter, Beth, had always insisted on braiding her brother's hair before he went to sleep. Boys need softness too, she declared, once, hand on her hip. And Thomas. He just grinned and let her do it. That moment lived in Ellie's muscle memory. She carried it like shrapnel. They died during a demonstration of force. Korvax's troops had been showcasing advanced crowd suppression tactics near a refugee school on the Darren 4 colony. 7 children marked for non-combatant status under 32 intergalactic treaties. 7 children who screamed, bled, and curled into each other as the plasma rained down. The footage was inconclusive. The apology? Regrettable error. The payout? 300 credits and a letter of condolences sent by automated courier. The justice system, tangled in layers of alien politics, had no appetite for human grief. But the writ of retribution had no such appetite for bureaucracy. It required only a valid claim, a registered loss, and the courage to see it through. The rest was spectacle. Ellie passed under a flickering neon sign that read Combatant Prep Zone. No refunds beyond this point. She entered the chamber, greeted by silence and recycled air. A weapons rack glowed along one wall, absurd in its variety: blasters, plasma whips, acid discs, void darts. She didn't reach for any. Instead, she placed her canvas pack on the bench and unzipped it. 7 drawings, each folded with ritual care. Beth had drawn her first, 5 stick figures under a sun that looked suspiciously like a cookie. Ellie, Thomas, Beth, Grandpa, and the cat. The childlike scrawl of names was still legible in red crayon. Beth always liked red, said it felt warm and sharp. Ellie unfolded each drawing, smoothing the creases with a tenderness that didn't belong in this place. Then she folded them again and tucked them into her jacket's inner lining. She'd carry them into the ring, not as armor, not as shield, but as witness. Outside, the betting boards flickered with odds. General Korvax, undefeated, was a solid lock at 1.02. Ellie Harker hovered at 8,000 to 1. Someone had added a side wager, how many seconds she lasts. Most bet under 30. Inside a broadcast booth orbiting above the Coliseum, 2 commentators prepped for the match. Have we ever had a, what does she list herself as? Parent, asked Ural, a squid-faced sentient known for his comedic brutality. First on record, replied his co-host, a crystalline entity named Plax. Technically within the bounds of open challenge. I suppose grief makes some mammals ambitious. Ah, Ural chuckled. She's either very brave or very suicidal. Possibly both. Either way, the rating spike is glorious. Ellie ignored the speakers. She was meditating, her breath slow, her heart steady. Not because she had found peace, but because she had found clarity. Korvax wasn't just the enemy. He was the emblem of impunity, of empire, of a galaxy so wrapped in its own theatrics it couldn't recognize quiet, controlled wrath until it shattered every bone in its body. There was a knock on the prep door. Time, said a voice. Ellie rose. Didn't speak. She didn't need to anymore. Her silence had texture now. Wait. Even the Zarthaki guards gave her a little more space than usual. They walked her down a narrow, red-lit tunnel where blood from previous matches had been only mostly cleaned. At the end, the gate stood open. She stepped out into the Coliseum. Above her, 70,000 creatures in every imaginable shape and size screamed for blood. Some shrieked, some hissed, some, paradoxically, composed spontaneous operas. Across from her, Korvax emerged. He laughed the moment he saw her. "I dreamed of crushing you slowly," he called. "Did you dream of saving them, little human? Of turning back time?" She looked up at him, unwavering. "No, I dreamed of this." Her voice wasn't loud, but something about it traveled, struck the right frequency. Somewhere, a Flether priest hissed in a way that meant unease. Korvax raised a huge furred fist. "I've killed a dozen mothers. You'll just be another whisper in the dirt." "Incorrect," Ellie said. "I'll be the silence that follows your name." The announcer, Thalgleam, gave his introductory speech with oozing enthusiasm, but the crowd's attention was not on the words anymore. It was on her, on the woman who had not screamed, not raged, not pleaded. She had walked through their theater of war like a shadow sharpened into steel. Thalgleam declared the formal stakes, a writ of retribution, verified by ancient Galactic code. Korvax laughed again. A dusty clause from a dying species. How quaint. Then he lifted his weapon, the same hammer he'd used to flatten the Darrenforth school walls. Painted black now. Ceremonial. Ellie didn't lift a weapon. She stepped forward, opened her palm, and let her blood touch the stone. The writ glowed faintly. A code accepted. Korvax growled. "Do you think that ritual means anything? Do you think the blood of one is equal to the power of rule?" She looked him dead in the eye. "No. But the blood of 7? It outweighs your empire." And then, for the first time in the Crucible's history, the crowd did not cheer the favorite. It hesitated, as if something somewhere had shifted. Korvax advanced, eager to begin. The air thrummed. The countdown glyphs lit up above them, flickering from 10 down. Ellie stood still, her breath steady, her thoughts sharp. She did not expect mercy. She did not seek glory. She had brought only memory, only resolve. And this time, it was the galaxy's turn to scream. The countdown hit 0. The floor dropped, and Ellie moved. Gravity shifted first, twisting sideways in a slow, nauseating swirl as the combat floor collapsed into motion. Dozens of segmented platforms buckled and spun, rising and falling like tectonic mouths. The Crucible had begun. Korvax landed with a crunch of stone, knees bent, hammer gripped in one fist like it was born there. Across from him, Ellie landed on all fours. A lesser fighter might have stumbled, but she absorbed the chaos with grace born of experience, muscle memory sharpened by sleepless nights and survival instinct. The audience roared. Acid bloomed in the air from an overexcited Varnax in the 3rd tier. Announcers warbled commentary in multiple languages, none of which mattered. Below it was quiet. Not peaceful. There was nothing peaceful here, but focused. Korvax struck first. He moved like a siege machine, all brutal momentum and towering force. The hammer came down with the sound of a collapsing building, carving a crater into the platform where Ellie had stood half a second earlier. She had already leapt backward, catching the edge of a rising plate, pivoting, using the motion to launch herself higher. He snarled, "You run. That's all humans ever do." She landed lightly, sweat already forming at her brow. "No, we learn." He charged again. She ducked beneath the hammer swing, brushed a hand against the ground, and kicked off into a roll. His second strike came faster, closer. The hammer grazed her back, spinning her midair, pain lancing along her spine. But she landed. He had size, strength. She had math, memory, and patience. She moved around him, not in fear, but in a spiraling pattern, eyes locked on the cadence of his movement. Every motion he made told a story. How he led with the right foot when angered, how he overcommit on lateral swings, how his grip tightened half a breath before impact. She marked them all. Korvax bellowed, "You shamed this arena." Ellie tilted her head. "You built this arena on dead children. I'm just here to close the story." He lunged. She waited until the last moment, then dove to the side, caught the edge of a rotating plate, and spun around behind him. Blood stained her shirt where the first blow had grazed her. Her knees ached from each landing. She'd made peace with pain years ago. A pause, brief and sharp. Korvax's nostrils flared. He was confused. Confusion in him looked like violence postponed. Ellie saw it in the shift of his shoulders, the brief delay before the next strike. He was recalibrating. She'd already done the math. Center mass, too risky. Joints, armored. Weaknesses, behavioral, historical, anatomical. She called upon the lessons taught by an older world. Lessons buried under diapers, spilled food, bedtime sobbing. You learned a person by watching how they broke. And he was breaking. She moved in again, this time not to evade but to strike. Her foot lashed out, connecting with the inside of his right knee, the one with the stress fracture hidden under ceremonial plating. It wasn't enough to cripple, but it wobbled. Korvax growled. "You think taps will win you this fight?" She didn't answer. She slipped behind him again, fingers flicking a switch on her sleeve. From the lining, a slender needle emerged. Not poisoned, just cold steel. She struck at his exposed side, barely a nick, but his skin split with a satisfying pop. His roar vibrated the floor. "Enough," he growled. "You want to play predator? Then die like one." He came at her full tilt, hammer raised overhead. She didn't dodge. Instead, she sprinted toward him. The crowd gasped. A Zarthaki diplomat fainted. She slid beneath the swing, used his overextension to leap up his thigh, kicked off his chest plate, and twisted midair, landing behind him. Her hand brushed his shoulder blade. The needle left a second mark. Still not deep. Still not fatal. But cumulative. Korvax spun, slower now. She was bleeding from her mouth. A tooth felt loose. Her ribs whispered complaints. She didn't stop. "You're not fighting," he growled. "You're pestering." "I'm educating," she replied low. The audience, once raucous, had quieted. There was a sharpness to the air, a communal leaning forward. The spectacle had become something else. Korvax roared and slammed the hammer down again. This time, it connected, barely. It caught her arm, sent her spinning, landing hard on her back. Pain flared like firecrackers down her spine. She gasped. Her body screamed at her to stay down. She got up. Korvax approached, slower than before. "Stay down," he said, almost curious. "You've earned a merciful death." She looked up, bloodied, lips trembling with effort. "You didn't offer them mercy." He paused. For just a moment. A flicker of something behind his eyes. Confusion, doubt, contempt. It didn't matter. Ellie stood again. She staggered to her left, leading him toward the northern quadrant, an area still slick with ancient blood, a little unstable from earlier impacts. He followed, predictably, and then she stepped into her final calculation. The terrain beneath her shifted, intentionally. She fell backward, arms outstretched. He surged forward to finish it. She twisted as she dropped. Her boot lashed out again, same knee. This time it buckled. He stumbled, hammer flailing. She surged upward, used her momentum to climb his side like a ladder, wrapped her arms around his neck, and drove the needle home at the base of his skull. Not poison, just pressure, directed into the spinal cluster that fed his primary limb control. He convulsed. The hammer fell from his hand. Ellie hit the ground beside it. They both lay there breathing. The crowd held its breath. Korvax tried to move. He couldn't. Ellie crawled to her knees. Her face was bloodied, her arm bent wrong, but her eyes were still sharp. "I studied your species," she said softly. "I studied your anatomy, your behavior. I memorized the footage." She reached into her jacket and pulled the drawings out, one by one, laying them on the ground beside his paralyzed form. "You killed my children," she whispered, her voice hoarse but steady. And the galaxy applauded. She looked up. "I want them to see your face now." The camera drones hovered in silence. Recording. Streaming. Archiving. She rose slowly, trembling. Then walked past him. No flourish. No raised fists. Just exit. The crucible didn't explode into cheers. It was silent, as if stunned by the presence of something it hadn't expected. Grief sharpened into a weapon, wielded without rage. She reached the edge of the platform. Behind her, Korvax remained still, and the Crucible's engines continued to hum softly beneath the sound of 70,000 creatures forgetting how to breathe. The Crucible's silence lingered longer than it should have. 30 seconds. 40. Not one voice in the 70,000-seat arena dared break it. Even the flame dancers of Clan Vort, who usually detonated celebratory gases at the first sign of victory, remained still, tubes flickering, uncertain. Korvax lay on the ground. A colossus felled. His limbs twitched, but not by his own will. His body was a war machine stalled mid-rage, his eyes darting uselessly in their sockets. The needle Ellie had driven into his spine still gleamed with a subtle wet shine of borrowed justice. Ellie didn't look back. She walked to the edge of the platform, blood in her mouth, left arm swinging loose and dislocated. Her steps were neither triumphant nor hesitant. They were finished. Each footfall was measured, exhausted, and earned. When she reached the boundary marker, a soft blue shimmer washed over her, scanning for contamination, weapons, falsified intent. It found none. What she'd carried into the ring had been legal. A mother's memory, a blade small enough to be dismissed, and pain too large to measure. Thal Gleam, the announcer, hovered near the center, unsure of how to proceed. Its mucus sacs pulsed awkwardly. Combatant Ellie Harker has achieved victory, it intoned, voice half-hearted, still uncertain whether what had just happened would get it fired or immortalized. In the upper broadcast spire, the two commentators stared at their feed in disbelief. Plax, the crystalline one, spoke first. This defies projection models. This ruins projection models. She didn't win, Ural muttered. She undid him. She walked in with nothing, and she left with the entire audience rethinking their bloodlust. I'm disturbed. You say that every time a match doesn't end in beheading. Exactly. Disturbing. But below, the silence was beginning to ripple. It started in the middle seats, where a Neuroxian diplomat dropped its recording orb and whispered a phrase never before associated with humans. Tactical genius. From there, the murmur spread. Viewers from the outer rings leaned forward. Species who had never once listed human among their strategic threats began issuing updated security protocols. The Flethers hissed a religious warning to the stars. A mother's oath is a blade without sheath. In 1,000 embassies, threat assessments blinked red. At the edge of the arena, Ellie stopped walking. She turned, not to the crowd, but to Korvax. He was still conscious. Barely. His breath rasped like gravel being stirred in a jar. He couldn't speak, but he could listen. She walked back toward him. A dozen security drones stirred, unsure whether to intervene. She knelt beside the great general who had once used children's deaths as a campaign boast. I'm not here to forgive you, she said, voice low. I didn't come to offer mercy. I came to deliver what the galaxy wouldn't. She laid the last crayon drawing beside his head. It was the simplest. A crooked sun, a stick figure family, a red X over the biggest figure. My daughter drew that the night before you burned her, Ellie whispered. Korvax made a sound, barely audible. It might have been a word, or maybe just air escaping disbelief. Ellie stood. A Zarthaki official tried to greet her at the exit with protocol documents and ceremonial scripts. She walked past him. A hologram of the Galactic Charter's Justice Clause appeared above the Crucible, auto-updating to reflect the fulfillment of Writ 497A. Status: executed. No further action. But action didn't care about status. In the High Council chambers of the Mantar Dominion, a dozen lesser generals screamed into communication lines. Troop formations reshuffled. News of Korvax's defeat and how it had occurred was spreading faster than anyone could spin it. The footage had gone live. The slow-motion replay of Ellie's final maneuver had already become a visual meme. When Mom says it's bedtime and means it. On Earth, screens lit up in underground bunkers. The few remaining humans still allowed within the Interstellar Defense Network watched in reverent silence. A woman with half-gray hair whispered. She made them remember. In a refugee station orbiting Gamma 6, a little girl clutched a threadbare doll and whispered to her brother, "They can't call us weak anymore." Back in the Crucible's medical wing, Ellie sat alone on the treatment bench. She refused the auto numbers. The pain reminded her she was still here. A medic hovered nervously. "You sustained 2 fractured ribs, a shoulder dislocation, and a probable orbital microfracture. You should." "I'm fine," she said. Not coldly, just fact. The medic hesitated. "You don't need to do the rest alone." Ellie looked at him. Her eyes had no anger, only a depth that made lesser beings uncomfortable. "I already did." Wordlessly, the medic left. She set the drawings on the bench beside her. One by one, the only audience that ever mattered. She breathed. Outside, riots broke out in 3 capital cities. Not against her. Against the system that had allowed Corvax to go unpunished until a parent had to become a weapon. Across the galaxy, 2 species closed their embassies on Earth. The Galactic Council called an emergency session. But within the Crucible, one final act remained. As Ellie exited the medical wing, a corridor of security units lined her path. None barred her way. Each scanned her. Each logger as combatant, fulfilled. Threat level, ambiguous. She emerged into the outer light. A storm of media drones buzzed toward her. "Ellie Harker, how did you beat Corvax? Are you a trained operative? Will you seek political office? Are you now the deadliest human alive?" She ignored all of it, until one question stopped her. A child's voice, clear, piping through a relay bot. "Did your kids know you were strong?" She paused, turned, looked straight into the lens. "My children," she said, "never needed me to be strong. They needed me to be present. The galaxy stole that from them, so I gave it a receipt." She walked away. The mic drop wasn't made of sound. It was made of silence. Measured, intimate, complete. In her wake, chaos swelled. Allies questioned alliances. Enemies re-evaluated border policies. For the first time in centuries, no one mocked the human diplomatic code. Not because they feared Earth, but because they now understood what Earth remembered. A mother never forgets. And the galaxy had just been reminded, violently, poetically, that mercy was a choice. And today, it had not been granted.